Alright, so welcome back everybody. So for this video I'm going to show you guys how to play The Spill. Now this is a big game. It takes up a lot of the table. You can't see hardly anything. You can't see the whole thing that this table occupies in the video, so I'll be moving the camera around a little bit here and there. So I apologize for that in advance. You might even see me up and at 'em, moving dice around and stuff like that while I explain the game. So, in The Spill, we are working together to try to save the animal life, the marine animal life, that had been affected by this oil spill. And oil is spilling out, and we're trying to contain the oil spill. We're also trying to save the wildlife. So let me show you guys how to play this game. Now, there are many ways you can lose this game, and there are several objectives that you need to complete in order to win the game. There's also another possible way you can win the game as well. One of the ways you can win this game is if you have used every single dice that is in this dice bag. If you have used every single one of these dice, they've all come out of the bag, and you don't have any of the certain loss and you don't have any of the loss conditions at the end of a turn, and this is empty, then you win the game. But that's contingent on not having one of the many loss conditions that this game has. What is one of the loss conditions? Well, we have a sick bay here. You can probably see that. And here, at the end of a turn, if an animal is contaminated at the end of a turn, so if this animal here is ever contaminated at the end of a turn, because it wasn't rescued in time, then the animal will go here to sick bay, okay? And if ever there is one of each of the 6 species in this game, the pelican, the stingray, the sea turtle, the dolphin, the seahorse, and the octopus, if all 6 of those animals are in sick bay, then it's game over at the end of a turn. So you got to try to mitigate that, of course. But that's not all. If 3 of the same species, so if there's 3 stingrays or 3 pelicans, for instance, if they've been contaminated and are in sick bay, then it's also game over. So ouch. Definitely a problem. So that's one of the ways you can lose this game. Another way you can lose this game is as dice are rolled into this dice tower oil rig, and they start appearing in each of these sectors, and there's 3 dice here. So let's say there was, there was one here, and there was one here, and there was another 4 dice here, and they rolled out into this section, and this causes what is called a spill out. And so then you have to put a spill out token here. Now, you can remove a spill out token, and I'll tell you how you can do it later. But if you remove a spill out token, then you don't have to worry, and you've gotten that taken care of. And you want to get rid of these as soon as possible, because once there is 6 of these spill out tokens on the board here, they're not necessarily all going to be like this necessarily, but once there's 6, then it's game over at the end of a turn. At the end of somebody's turn, it's going to be game over. So obviously we need to try to prevent that as well. So that's another lose condition that could happen. I played this game by myself because this game is a cooperative game, but it can be played solo. And when you play solo, you play as all of the specialists in the game. And I did not lose by a spill out. I lost by having 3 of a species in sick bay. So that was another reason why I lost. So that's spill out tokens, and that's the 3 ways you can lose this game. 6 spill out tokens, or obviously 3 of a particular species, or 1 of every single species in sick bay, and then it's game over. But how do you win besides depleting all of the dice in the dice bag and not having those 3 lose conditions at the end of a turn? Well, it varies between each game, but there's a card here that tells you the win conditions of a game. So each of these win conditions would have to be achieved in order to win. You would need to be able to save 3 contaminated animals, meaning there would have needed to be an animal that was contaminated and that you would have needed to have saved it in time. And if you didn't, then it wouldn't work, obviously, and you wouldn't get that towards the win condition. So you do want them to be contaminated at some point in the game, because you're going to need to obviously complete this objective in order to win. Another possible objective is remove a total of 12 oil dice from the game. There's a board down here, which we'll get to later, of where you put the oil dice that you've removed from the game. You'd have to get 12 of them. I unfortunately was only able to get 9 removed from the game, and I still, of course, didn't make it in time. And then you would also have to save 2 full sets of marine life. That's another win condition that would have to be achieved. You'd have to achieve all 3 of these. I unfortunately only had 1 full set of marine life saved, and I was 2 away from completing this objective, but it still wouldn't have been enough. I only had 2 contaminated animals that were saved, and so I would have had to do all 3 of these. So I'm still 3 dice away, still 1 away, and still 2 away to completing this win condition, all these win conditions, in order to win the game. So that's just one of the many cards that have, 3 win conditions that you have to be able to win. So I've talked about how you can win the game. I've talked about how you can lose this game. So let's talk about the flow of the game, the actions and stuff like that. Well, before anybody goes, there is a total of 8 dice that will be set aside. They will not be put into the bag. This is the initial spill flow. Okay, so let's go ahead and just show you what I mean by rolling, or should I say putting these dice into the oil rig. Okay, so we're just going to do this. Okay, then I must now put the dice according to the sectors they've rolled based on dice. Now I got 3 6s in this area here. So during the setup, during this initial spill, if this was to happen, this animal is not contaminated at this point. You have to re-roll this dice, okay? So we'll re-roll that in a moment. Let's take care of this. I rolled the 1 dice for this area, so it's going to go over here. This one got 3 of the dice, so the 6 will go there, which you probably can't see, obviously. The 4 will go there, and the 1 will go there, and then this area only got 1 dice, so the 2 will go there. And then we just re-roll this one, and we got a 4 for this location here. So that's the initial setup. That's the initial start of the game. Now, there is a flow of game. Everyone is going to start with a specialist. Okay, so let's move the camera again, and the table somewhat. So apologize for loud noise. Okay. Now, each player is going to get a specialist. If you're playing a 3-player game, then you will have an additional specialist anyways that everyone will kind of control and get to work together on how that specialist is going to take their turn. Okay? But if you're playing solo, you will play with every single specialist, taking 1 specialist turn at a time. Each specialist has a special ability as well. That's why you want to be a particular specialist. We have the marine biologist here, the marine vet, the environmental tech, and the risk engineer. You'll notice there are tokens on these specialists. Inside of that dice bag, there are blue dice. If you ever get them, if you ever get one of them, you'll have to roll them as well. And then, depending on what side of the dice it rolled on, it will probably flip over one of these tiles here on all of the specialists. And usually they're bad effects. There's only 1 good effect, and I did not get that 1 good effect. So, but And there's a variety of different things that will happen, but we'll talk about that later. So that's something to note. Now, on your turn, you will usually first do what is known as the spill. And in a standard game, you will have to roll 3 dice, basically, before you can take your turn. But since it's the first turn, that doesn't happen because we already rolled the 8 dice for the first turn, for the first initial spill out. So that wouldn't happen. And so the marine biologist, let's just say it's the marine biologist, okay, they would now go and take their action, their turn. They get 4 action points that they can utilize on their turn. And it even tells you here what you can possibly do with those action points. For 1 action point, you can move your boat, and the marine biologist is this blue boat here, okay? It can move up to 2 sectors. A sector would be going here. This is moving 1 sector. This would be moving 2 sectors, okay? That would be a move of 2. That would take 1 of your AP away to do that. Another action you can take is you can rescue a marine animal for 1 AP. So this marine biologist could rescue this seahorse for just 1 action point. Nice, right? And she could do it again and rescue this sea turtle as well because she's in the same sector, okay? And we'll show you where these animals are going later. She also has this special ability where she could actually use that to rescue an animal in an adjacent sector. So she could also rescue this dolphin as well because it's an adjacent sector. And that would still, of course, require 1 action point to do. So that's some of the possibilities of what she can do action-wise. Now, another thing she can do is, let's say this was the 6. Let's say this was a 6. This is not the first turn. There's been turns. There's the 6. And this animal here is contaminated, okay? Well, obviously she can rescue an animal that's adjacent to her sector, okay? But it will require 2 AP, 2 action points to save an animal that has been contaminated by oil, okay? But if there's a dice here with the animal, you can't rescue the animal until that dice has been rectified. So then there's 2 other actions you can take. Well, several actually. There's 2. So you can either push back an oil die for 1 AP. So if she was to move here, she could do another action point to remove this die. She wouldn't remove it. She would just simply put it back into the bag, okay? Which means it's still going to be a threat because, it's going to get rolled again anyway, okay? And that'll just make more dice that are going to be rolled for the future. So it only delays the inedible. But for 3 AP, she could instead remove the dice completely. And it would go to a remove section on another board. But that costs 3 AP to do, so that's expensive. But regardless of the case, regardless of what she decided to do on her turn, she could basically move 1 for 1 point action, an action point to move. Then she could spend another action to basically push the die out off the board. She could spend her last 2 AP points to save the contaminated animal. And when a contaminated animal is still on the board at the end of the turn, then it would go to sickbay. So she saved it in the nick of time, okay? You're not always going to make it to an animal because it's probably going to be on the other side of the board when it happens because you're playing as a certain specialist. That's going to happen quite a bit. And that's happened to me quite a bit. I just couldn't make it in time to save these contaminated animals. But yes, that's something she could potentially do on her turn. So that's all the different types of actions she can take. So like I said, for 3 AP, she can remove an oil dice. For 2 AP, she can rescue a contaminated animal. And that goes for every other specialist, okay? They all have the same actions, okay? For 1 action point, she can push back an oil dice. For 1 action point, she can rescue a marine animal. And for 1 action point, she can move up to 2 sectors. and she can do as many of these as she wants on a turn, as long as she has the action points to do them. Now, just because you only technically have 4 action points in a game, you actually are allowed 2 additional action points that you can use on your turn for those really crunch moments that you might need that to happen, especially if you're desperately trying to save an animal in time. But whenever you take an additional action with your 2 additional action points, what's going to happen is you'll notice over here to the left, there's this extra action pool. So if you were to take an additional action, then what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to take a dice out of the bag, okay? Because you used that additional action point. So now instead of using 4 action points that turn, you've used 5. So you have to take out a die. And if you did end up using 6 on that turn, then you would have to put another dice there. Then, during the next player's turn, during the next spill phase, not only would you have to roll 3 dice, most likely, unless this special token here has been raised up higher, then it might be more than 3, okay? But not only will you have to roll those 3, but you'd also have to roll these 2 as well. So now you've just made it even more risky. Instead of rolling maybe 3 dice, now you're going to be rolling 5 dice. So that's the problem with that. You can try to save yourself for a crunch moment, but then you're just making it worse for yourself. So that's the different actions that you can take. Then at the end of your turn, there's the cleanup phase. Now, if a weather dice is rolled, okay, and it ends up flipping over one of these tiles, and the weather is affecting you somehow, some way, at the end of your turn, you can flip this back to face down, okay? That's one of the things you can do during the cleanup phase. Obviously, another thing that will happen during the cleanup phase is if there was an animal on the board that's contaminated that wasn't rescued in time, it goes to sickbay during the cleanup phase. And then you check to see if you've been able to complete one of your win conditions. That's when you do it. You would do it during the cleanup phase. And if you happen to do it do the third one during the end of your turn, and you don't have any of the lose conditions in the mess either, then you would automatically win the game as a team, or solo if you're playing by yourself. So that's basically the different types of actions that you can take. Now, there's still some more stuff to talk about. So now, let's come over here and talk about this board here a little bit more. Okay? So first of all, let's talk about the weather effects. When a certain dice is rolled, it's going to be a certain icon, okay? And you can sort of see these icons a little bit, possibly, right? And so if you ever roll this particular one, which is this token here, then resource cards cannot be used for that turn, okay? And whenever that dice is rolled, every specialist has to flip over that particular tile, that particular token, even if it's not their turn. So it's going to be affecting everybody else's future turns. It's not just affecting the person who happened to roll the weather dice, okay? So that's one of the weather dice effects that can happen. Resource cards are all sorts of things. Every player will get to look at 2 of these resource cards, okay? And they will choose one to keep for the game. So everybody will basically put out a resource card. And then as a team, you can decide when you get certain cubes to put on these cards here. You can activate these abilities later to do all sorts of benefits, all sorts of things that you can help you with. So basically, if you did get that, then you wouldn't be able to use those awesome benefits. If you get this token here flipped face up with a particular die that has the same look basically, then no specialist abilities can be used. So the marine biologist wouldn't be able to use her ability to save an animal in an adjacent sector that turn, okay? If this one is ever, revealed as the dice, then all movement is reduced by 1. So you can't move 2 spaces now. You can only move 1 space for that turn. Ouch. And then there's another one. For this one here, marine animals. So if you ever get this one, okay, and this is what it would be looking like if you did get it, for all the others especially, right? You would have to pay 1 additional action point to rescue marine animals that turn. So to rescue a contaminated animal is going to cost 3 that turn, and a healthy animal would cost 2 action points if this was the token that was face up during your turn. So ouch. And then there is one bonus token that actually is a good thing if you happen to roll it. This one here, if you ever get this particular token rolled dice-wise, then you get 1 bonus action point for that turn. So now you have 5 action bonus points for that 1 turn. Everyone would get to flip this up, so that's like a benefit for everybody. Okay, so 1 extra action point. But that's the only benefit out of 6 of the 6-sided die. But then there's one more that doesn't actually have a token involved. If you ever get the one dice that looks like a little drop, a little raindrop. So let's see if I can find one of these blue dice and show you the raindrop. If you ever get this one, then what happens is you have to immediately take 3 more black dice out of this bag and roll them. Or should I say 3 more oil dice, which is the black dice, out of this bag and drop them in the dice tower. So, ouch, that happened to me. I was not happy. That was a painful moment of the game. So that was definitely dangerous. So that's another thing that could possibly happen with weather effects. Now, whenever you remove an oil die from the game, whenever it's removed, not pushed, but removed, it's going to go to this location here. And so remember, one of those win conditions was you had to have 12 oil dice removed from the game. So that means you would have to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. You'd have to have all of that, okay, removed from the game. That's a lot. That might take a while. Okay, but the cool thing is, whenever you get 3 dice removed from the game, you get one of these little orange activation cubes, which you then can choose as a team to put on one of these resource cards, and then later on when you want to use them, you can use them as like a freebie for your turn. Okay, so an additional benefit. That's how you get to use these ability cards, these resource cards. You have to be able to remove oil or save animals to get these activation cubes. The other way you're going to get these activation cubes is if you are able to save one of each species in each of these rows. So if you save all 6, then that will get you an activation cube. If you can do it again, that will get you another activation cube. So even if you're like, you got all the octopus saved, but you don't have the others, all these others saved, you're not going to get all these activation cubes. So it's definitely going to happen, though. You're going to definitely have animals you're saving more often than others, for sure. But yes, you're going to want to do that. Remember, one of the win conditions was you had to have 2 rows completely saved of animals. That includes whether it's healthy or not. It doesn't matter. But each row would have to be saved. All of these would have to have animal tokens on them. Every single one of the first 2 rows as a win condition. Okay? That's another thing. Now, then obviously you don't also have to save 3 contaminated animals. So they would also be here as well. Those 3 contaminated animals. They'd be there as well. And whenever you cause a spill out, whenever there is a spill out, when there's 3 black oil dice that end up in a spot, you're going to put this token there, right? But every time that happens, it's going to cause this token to move up. And as it continues to move up, it'll get worse for you. And then instead of rolling 3 dice at the initial part of the turn, you're going to be rolling 4 dice instead for just a standard game. And if you were playing the ultimate game, man, 6 dice if it ever ends up there, for if you were playing ultimate. But standard, man, I didn't even win at standard. So this game is definitely hard for sure. So I've pretty much talked about everything you need to know in order to play the game, I think. I think I've pretty much covered it. I didn't really talk about any of the specialist abilities or any of the resource card abilities, but you have everything this video should have everything you need in order to play this game. So if you guys liked my video, don't forget to leave me a like, and I'll see you guys again next time. Bye!